Hey guys, this is Anne Dyari, and this is a quick walkthrough of one of my bases. So as you can see, I started with a ballpoint pen sketch that I took a photo of and have opened up in Sci, and I'm flipping it back and forth, adjusting it to be exactly as I'd like it. And as you can see here, I am going over with a brush, going over what most people consider as lines, but it's just going to be turned into my painting of the base. My bases are done in one layer, so I'm just going over the darker points and flipping it back and forth, making sure it looks good from either side. And here I'm just taking a selection of the area I want to work on so I can just paint over pretty easily without worrying about going outside my bounds. I have bumped this up to 10 times speed, so this is happening much more slowly than you're seeing right now. I do not actually paint this fast. That would be amazing. But, and here I have a little issue where it's not actually going as dark as I want it to go. I've accidentally locked the opacity at a certain layer, and I'm figuring out how to fix that. It happens to me on occasion. I don't use layers a lot, so when I do use layers, things like that can happen. So here we go again. Just painting over highlights, shadows, and really that I can make a more detailed tutorial on how I decide the lighting, but for the most part it's just practice and knowing what I like aesthetically and looking at other art, and of course drawing from real life as well. But one of the tricks that I have learned while arting is that I like when art is using shadows that are not grayscale. So if you notice, I'm not really using grayscale, and you can tell by looking at my color palette exactly what kind of shades I'm using. I tend to use a lot of purples, and I find mixing in greens and blues and golds into the shadows really make a really interesting light. Play of the light. So experiment, have fun, try different colors, and colors reflect onto other surfaces, so play around with that. Don't stagnate yourself into just darkening colors to grayscales, because it can be so much more interesting when you add them in. And if you see, I'm doing some more finer details on the fur, um, giving the shading from the hood, making sure that that part of the head's a little more shadowed, and I'm trying to make the shading not so stark. I find on bases I like when the shading's a little more subtle, because that way the patterns of the character's faces shows up better. When there's too much fur detail, it gets hard to see. Some people are better at doing this than me, and they can do like a really amazing fur detail and still have the patterns come out amazing. But for me, I like a soft light. Now, as you notice, as I'm painting, I'm doing them in large chunks, and then I'm finishing them. So I'm doing it piece by piece. That way it looks... I work through a section of the fur until I like how it looks, and then I continue on to the next part, most of the time. I just like seeing how it looks final, as the final product. So I'll do a lot of the details all at once in one section and leave the rest of the parts unfinished. As you notice, I've barely touched the tail and the bottom legs. Yet the face is already basically done. It's just the way I do it. Everyone has their own method. Some people do everything at the same time, like each part. They do the whole picture in one step and then do the next step, and I find that too tedious. I like doing each part individually, and that's just how I've learned to paint. And right now I'm just doing strong lighting on the rain slicker. I'm making it so that there's a yellow default color that people can change if they want, but I find yellow rain slickers are cute, so I'm making the default yellow. Going over painting in the rain slicker, and as you can see, I've moved to the legs and the fur because that was bothering me and I wanted to finish it. And also, if you notice, as I'm doing the shading and changing the lighting around, instead of having the lines, you can see I can paint the black lines into it, just like a darker shadows almost. I've been told that's really weird. It's just how I learned to paint. When I first started digital painting and I didn't know it was digital paint. I just thought that's how everyone drew digitally. I didn't know there were layers. So I'm like, oh man, these people have such crisp lines. How do I make them? And so I would just paint around the outside of them. So my line art, quote quote, is just painted lines that are really just an imitation of line art, and I just find I like doing that. I've since learned how to do line art, but I like this way. I mean, that's how I learned originally how to paint. That's how I painted for years before I found out otherwise. So sorry if it's a little strange. It's how I do things. So at this point, I'm just making sure that the color layers are going to match up, so when someone goes to recolor it, the color fits into the right sections. Because, yeah, we just want to make sure this face is easy to use for people to recolor, so I take a little extra time to try to get this right. Though I know probably there's many other more efficient ways to do this. This is just how, again, I taught myself to do it. I didn't know how anyone else made bases, and so I kind of just went for it and tried to figure out a way that I could do it. And here we are with the highlights. You notice I go on really strong with the highlights at first, and then I tone them down to give it a softer look. I still have some pretty strong highlights on the jacket and adding some stronger highlights, especially the eyes and the nose and the tongue to make them extra shiny, because I like how that looks. And that's basically how I make a base. So let me know if there's other things you'd like to see me talk through. I can do things a little slower than this. I could focus on certain sections. Just let me know, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you again for all your support on Patreon. It really helps me out. Thank you guys. It's so nice to be able to spend some extra of my free time to do art and to make these things for you guys, and your support helps me keep doing this. Thanks. So I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully I'll get to make more of these. Bye!